Hello, thanks for joining us on this video. Welcome. I will give some context for my conversation with Johannes, our eminent true thinker on Heidegger and learning how to die, essentially. Learning how to die well, I would say. But first, let me give some housekeeping. So a few things. Circling, my company, the Circling Institute, is currently doing all of their work online. So we have a Circling weekend coming up that'll be on Zoom, July 11th and 12th. We have the Art of Circling, a year-long training. The online version is open for registration now. And there's a Thursday evening, every Thursday evening, we have an open to everybody drop-in circle. So links for all that below. I think there's discounts on the weekend and on registration for the Art of Circling. All that stuff will be in the email the sooner you register. So hope to see you there. Also, if you're interested in working with me in coaching one-on-one, go ahead and email me. That is below, and we'll get in contact. And I'll cover cost and what it's all about. All right, so Johannes. So I think for most of you, I would imagine you probably watched my other discussions with Johannes. I'm always really just struck with him about So in fact, we talked about in this video, the sense of the divine madness of gets awakened in you, like the philosophical awakening, right, is precisely awakening to something that you can't ever quite reach, right? In fact, it awakens in some sense, as we talk a little bit about this, about perhaps what Heidegger is disclosing when he says death, right? Not death like an event in the future, not your demise, but the deepest horizon, that is also most near, that in a certain sense allows thinking itself to disclose, right? So we talk a lot about, right, about death, about thought, a radical understanding that Heidegger really revealed about the movement of thinking and its relationship to negativity or the nothing or concealment. And it's so interesting because I just really appreciate Heidegger and in philosophy and all the conversations with Johannes and essentially all the conversations I've been having. Seems to me that what all of that has in common, right? All these conversations, all the people, philosophy, to me, it reveals what I'm most interested in, which is like that which can't be fully revealed or taken over, but the mystery, the sense of getting closer and closer to the mystery of what it is to be, and awaken that and allow that to reveal your life and how you respond, right? And everything that we do. So in that way of revealing, like allowing that which is concealed to come into unconcealment, without making it a position, but opening what's beyond the horizon, right? What's most near to us. So we just get into that sense of it, that hermeneutic sense of speaking into that. So it was a really rich conversation, and just an opportunity to really see somebody who, I would say, a true thinker, a true philosopher, who you could just feel it in him. You know, he can't not do it, right? So, and also he's got a whole thing opening up for him in terms of teaching essentially university level classes open to everybody, and seminars happening online, and we talk a lot about that. So the links for his upcoming classes below. Please check that out. I'm going to be diving into this one on death and being, and so we talk about that a lot as well. So enjoy.
Not recording.
All right. We are now.
Oh, now good. Action.
So welcome.
Welcome
again. Welcome again. You have been like, I think you're a couple of things. You're discovering something through teaching online and doing these classes online. That's one. It wasn't. I think this kind of emerged in the process of being in quarantine and starting a channel. But what I'm pretty interested in, like, what this reveals about, like, our time, right? Like, that you're actually teaching intense Heideggerian courses, right, outside of the university system. And people are coming and they're liking it and they're paying for it. And as you said, they're actually just there to learn for its own sake.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we started to begin at the beginning, right? That's always the problem of philosophy. Yes. We're kidding. Yes. No, yes. We're kidding. Weirdly enough, I had the idea to put up philosophy videos, at least 6 or 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. When I moved to London, 2013 to 14. I never did it, of course. Mm-hmm. And there was a moment, and I finished my PhD in 2018 and then moved back to London in the fall, mm-hmm. To take up a very small position at Birkbeck and mm-hmm. do some other day labor,
right?
As we laborers of the spirit want or have to do, actually, because we also have to eat, weirdly enough. Yeah. And then I finally I had a couple of weeks off, and I sat down on my now infamous sofa upstairs, the velvet sofa, which was previously owned by Oscar Wilde. Just kidding. And sat down and recorded a lecture, which is on the origin of thinking, which is basically just an interpretation of an attempt at a philosophical interpretation of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Mm-hmm. And I put it up on Instagram, on YouTube, and I think it got about 2 or 3 views, 4 of them mine. And it's really weird but then it started something, because I had the idea anyways to do it. And it would be easy to say it's out of necessity, because you're not really allowed what it is that you want to teach at university. But I think it would be short-sighted to call it a necessity. Mm-hmm. It's rather that, because then you're romantic and we want to be classical. Yeah. Which means there's a full-flowing yes thing. It's simply just it begins to flow, and it needs to be out there. I mean, not everything needs to be shared. Not everything needs to be recorded. Yeah. There's always the notebook of the thinker, of which there are 2 or 3 just here on this desk. Yeah. Which may or may not find their ways into publication. Here's my bigger one, where I'm working on a full new book now at the moment.
Are those the ones that we're going to find after you die? There
will be terrible things in there. No, this is actually, I'm working on a first book in German, which will be an original work of philosophy.
Right.
So no longer a commentary, but even commentary what is commentary? The commentary has become to comment on what someone else has said about what someone else has said about what someone else has said. Right. Commentare means to think with. Mentare means to think, and con is with. So commentare is to think with someone.
Yeah.
And this is what thinking always has to do. And what I did with the channel was never to get, you could make a video that is very really well produced, and talk about something that everybody else is talking about right now, right? So something political, and then this movement through this lens, right? Or the critical theory of Jordan Peterson, that's always a hit, or the mythology of Jung in the land. Okay, that gets you hits. No, I just sat down, and one of the weirdest videos I did was just with my copy of Side on Side, Being in Time, and reading the first page in a way that it would just come. And one of the first videos I recorded was on Heraclitus and Parmenides, and that's the one you found.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So those are, I think, I at least like to think that they are quite rigorous.
Yeah.
But then again, not rigorous in the sense in which it would have to be now in order to get published.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, that you see the machine of academia and what it demands of you in order to get published, in order to get a job, which is basically you die by numbers, right? It's a death by numbers, to speak in the slogan, which means you have to publish in high impact journals, as they call it. And then when you do that, you get high impact. Yeah. So you're constantly evaluated.
Yeah.
So how do you flip this? I mean, something I learned very early on was you flip it by you're still playing the numbers game, right?
Right.
Because you need to get to some subscriber level.
Yeah.
In order to get some traction, to have somewhat that they call following.
Yeah.
In order to get some people who are actually really, willing to sign up for your courses, which is now actually the third one now. I'm running the third course this year. Right. And there will be a fourth one.
Yeah.
Late in the summer on Nietzsche. This one now is on death, and Heidegger on death.
Yeah.
The one before was not actually on Heidegger. The one before was on idleness, which was on Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Russell, Nietzsche, Humboldt, Heidegger one lecture, and Joseph Pieper. So it was on total work, etc.
Right.
And the also again possibilities of escape. But what I'm seeing with the video, I mean, as you know, I find it also quite dangerous. Right, nothing is just promising a utopia. There's the danger of turning something into entertainment and background noise. Yeah. But then again, you can cut through so much with it, and you can cut through the gatekeepers. Yeah. You can not even cut through, because that sounds too aggressive. I would maybe rephrase it and say, you can just let them be. Yeah. Yeah. Let them be gatekeepers over here, and build your own space somewhere else. Right. Where through some eccentricity, people actually begin to listen. Yeah. I mean, it is a quite remarkable thing to do.
Yeah. I think that's a key word.
Which one?
People begin to listen.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, if this is there's no status in this, right? This is the funny thing also. There's nothing, actually probably the opposite. At least, well, it's changing a bit now, I guess. There might be the usual status hierarchies too. But I think for me, it was in the beginning just a way of experimenting with texts I had written to see whether they actually make sense. Right. But also the ability to build something in such a way that if there is, I really wanted to teach a course on Heidegger and technology. I asked the university where I met whether I could teach it, and said it's bureaucratically impossible. Yeah. Even though students actually demand it, there's no, I mean, in pure market terms, there's no higher demand than for Adorno and Heidegger at the moment. Right. That's what. Right. Because meaning is, as is speaking in slogans, but meaning is collapsing. Yeah. And those are figures who have attempted to provide answers to what's going on, and others, of course, too. But it's made, and even those who are in positions at universities where they can teach what they would like to teach, it takes years
Right.
sometimes until you can actually do it. And
Right.
there's no something, if you've got something to say, to share. For example, I've written a book on Heidegger on death and being, which is about to be published by Springer.
You're right.
And
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And the course is based on this book and on 7 years of research. Now,
right.
My question, maybe I'm just overly pragmatic, but the possibility for me would be either to wait forever until I'm allowed, perhaps, that I could teach this, or I just do it myself. We've actually already filled the Saturday seminar, and there was so much interest that I'm offering now Sundays as well.
Yeah, and we're putting I'll be putting a link to what you're talking about, because so in other words, you're doing a course right now on death, Heidegger and death.
Yeah, it starts. So the seminars start in 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, so I'll put links below so people who want to join that. I'll be in it.
Yes. You saw the last one, on Heidegger and Deleuze.
Yeah.
And technology.
Yeah. They're awesome. They're really awesome.
I remember what you said. Masterpiece.
Yes. It really was
one of my lectures. So
yeah.
I'm humbled, but of course I agree. But I'm kidding. How couldn't I agree? No.
Right.
No, it's no. But this was a tremendous experience, because there's lots of people signed up. Actually, an artist from New York, Kevin McCoy is his name. He signed up for it, and I think he had a bit of German at high school when he was younger. And I went through all the modes of Stellen, of Gestell, right, of positionality.
Yeah.
And he apparently, and we saw this in the pro seminar.
Yeah.
He built a new, or envisioned a new art project because of this lecture on Stellen, on positioning and positionality.
Yeah.
These are the weird things that happen with it.
Right.
So
I'm just imagining just that. Well, a couple of things. I'm noticing just that you're able to do this, right? You're able to just say what you think and where your thinking is going, and then have people and offer that, and then have people want to participate, not for a degree, not for an outcome, not for, but because they want to learn.
Yes.
There's something about that that's so encouraging, right? And so strange that you're becoming a new point in which we get to find that out, right? Where there are people that want to learn for learning's sake.
Yeah.
There's something about that that's just so encouraging to see happen. Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of reasons for it, and we don't need to get into it. Why? I think with philosophy, though, specifically, it's almost bound to happen with philosophy first. But philosophy leaves, and everything's quite open. There's no evaluation. One of the greatest things Ivo de Cinago once said in a lecture course that he gave 10 years ago in Bolzano. He said, how should I evaluate you on whether you have understood the eternal recurrence of the like in Nietzsche? Yeah, you have understood this 80%, 90%?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Either it's understood and thought through, or it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you? It's and also there's a tendency at universities now where everyone tries to be a B plus or and operates within that framework. That's true for young scholars as well as young students. There's no one who just diverts a bit and experiments with something. Extremely adapted to the machine, to the wheel work. and also lying, I think, young scholars, I think, have a tendency to lie. Either they're quite happy where they are, or they just think that, I'm just going to compromise for the next 10 years until I have tenure, which no longer exists in most places.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I have some position and some power, then I can finally say what I'd like to say.
Right.
Once you're at this point, you've already lost it. But in terms of learning, speaking of what I'm trying to build is an online academy.
Right.
Now, the Halcyon, right? The Halcyon Guild.
Mm-hmm.
You're a member of it.
Yeah.
And there's a forum and everything else, and students can sign up for the forum and be in touch with others. It's becoming a bit of almost like a think tank.
Right.
It's a weird word, but people who exchange ideas on there and gather knowledge. But Halcyon, we can talk about what Halcyon means, but there's a wonderful quote from Schelling, the German philosopher, who said the following: all rules for study are summed up in this one: learn only in order to create.
Right.
And that's
learn
the light
in order
motif.
to only create. Right.
Learn only in order to create.
Yes.
Which is from his book on university studies, on what the university should be as a place.
Yeah.
And this is the leitmotif of the Halcyon Academy.
Right.
And then I've written the text on this, and I say, we worry not at all about meaningless credentials or pieces of paper. Instead, our focus is on the true formation and education of human beings. May we flourish and fully become who we are. Yeah. Our seminars are spaces of otium cum dignitate, idleness with dignity, free from instrumental rationality and the demands of the market.
Right.
Because when you deal with students, what you're dealing with very often is people who are young, scared and anxious about the job market.
Yeah.
And also people who go into debt.
Yeah.
And I think philosophy is one of the first disciplines to do this, because of the nature of philosophy. It's always, philosophy is in the tension between life and thinking, and it has to articulate life without falling into life, just like Socrates always has one foot on the market square, but does not become really a market participant. Yeah. And here's, there's all, other issues we could go into, but I think also that it's when someone gets bitten by philosophy very young. Someone, let's say you're 15, you read Nietzsche, maybe Camus, or Sartre, or it's usually one of the existentialists, or someone like Heidegger, perhaps a shorter text. And then life, as they say, speaking non-philosophically, life happens. Yeah. You have to start making money. You leave your home, perhaps, and you go out into the world. But if it once has gotten under your skin, it will never leave you. Yeah. And what I see with many of the students is that there's something that they want to understand, and it's incredible. And you have a guy who runs a jiu-jitsu school in Texas, a lawyer in Florida. Right. Who really, high, very intense job. Yeah.
He's a client of mine too.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And you have.
He's great.
Yeah. Then you have. Yeah. Then there's another guy who's doing a postdoc in engineering at a very prestigious Ivy League university. There's a very nice gentleman up in Toronto who's from Turkey originally. Who I think, I think they all, for some reason or other, wish to understand something. Yeah. And always have longed to read philosophy. Very often, though, what happens is we go to university. Yeah. Then, this is philosophy? Wow. Yeah. It's sterile and dead. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It doesn't happen. It doesn't occur. When I left Bolzano, I had ancient Greek at school. We read the original texts, and so this is how you become accustomed to this way of thinking. Right. I came to Bolzano, I had Ivo Di Gennaro as my teacher there, and I thought, wow, this is all of philosophy. Well, I'm just going to study philosophy now. Right. Then I came to other places, and then it took me. There were some who were really good, but for others it was just a job. It was a 9 to 5 and then goodbye. And then I was very lucky again with my supervisor, Miguel Lebestegui, because he's also just a very good thinker and a very good pedagogue. That's so rare. This is someone who lets you roam, right, and lets you walk off, and then only then rears you back in,
right,
brings you back when you get too lost, when you go too far astray.
Yeah.
It's you have to be able to get mad a bit when you write a PhD. So I was lucky with my supervisor, but I think it's becoming all the more enclosed and sterile.
Right.
And so what this provides really enough is this digital space. I mean, is the possibility to bring people in who really just want to read and write.
Yeah.
Sometimes even write. So one of the things that that came out of these, we never planned for a pro seminar, a public pro seminar.
Yeah.
In the Heidegger Deleuze course.
Yeah.
And then we just came up with it at some point and said, actually, they're quite good. Maybe they want to present something. And we offered it to them. And then some of them actually signed up. So I offered the same thing again with the Idleness with Dignity course. And so this will happen next week.
Yeah.
And then during this time, I said, this was a 7 consecutive Saturdays. That's almost an entire term in the UK.
Yeah.
Which is 10 weeks.
Right.
What some of them just started writing. And so I said, share the essays, put them up on the forum,
right,
and comment on each other, and then you can present parts of these essays, and then you get these emails from some kid who's up in Canada who says, thank you for giving me the gift of thinking, or someone else who's is very inspired now again to learn. He's a doctor in South Africa.
Yeah.
Because you can't learn just on your own.
Right. Right.
Also, the teacher is the learner in the room.
Yeah.
And the teacher needs to be very aware of this. Also, you're the one who's learning.
Yeah, Heidegger's sense of letting learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the approach is just a different one, because there's no honor. I mean, there's no status that comes with having been in an online course with me. There's nothing that comes from that, except for perhaps something learned. So the engineer was now going to Cornell, said in an email that he's now more focused after these 7, or has noticed this over the 7 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make it instrumental or operational. You do this course, you will be more focused. No, but this was one of the ways in which it translated into the practical, in the sense that when you share conversation with others in a very focused manner. And the weird thing is also, no one ever looks at their phone during my online seminars, but they do all the time during my because it's weird. This kind of the focus is much more radical here. If I than in the classroom, they always keep looking at their phones. Yeah. And none of the questions they would have to worry about, is it relevant for the exam?
Right.
And here's what I always ask my students. First seminar, lecture, I always ask, why are you here? I remember I did this 5 years ago for the first time at Warwick. And first year students, first semester, ancient Greek philosophy. I asked, why are you here? And one of them raised their hands and said, is this relevant for the exam?
Right.
And I said, no. You have to wonder, why are you here? And the good thing is the place I'm at now is a bit different. Someone actually said I'm looking for meaning. But I think with these voluntary online courses that are very high level, they're difficult, they're properly academically philosophical, but they do address the kind of people who really want to, and there's many out there who didn't get the chance to do a PhD, or who didn't get the chance to stay in learning because, as it is, we said before, life happens. They have to make ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get isolated, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
every day conversations are about Netflix shows and whatever else nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And very, very often people are isolated
Yeah.
and want to, I mean, literally what these seminars are about, they're about a community.
Yeah.
About people. It's like going to school. You go to university, you become friends with the people
Right.
you're around with.
Right.
So the
Right.
seminars are also they're philosophical and
Right.
they're rigorous.
Yeah.
But they, there's a bit of banter,
Uh-huh.
obviously,
Uh-huh.
and they get to stay in touch.
Right.
It's up to the students, but
Right.
usually, actually, one of the things that happened with the Heidegger Deleuze course with Justin Murphy,
Uh-huh.
a reading group formed.
Mm-hmm.
And they're reading Ernst Jünger and Nietzsche and Adorno, and they're still meeting apparently.
Hmm. Hmm. That's awesome. Well, I think one of the things you said was, you said, yeah, they want to learn something. Like there was a sense when you said that the what to learn, even I could imagine, even if they could say what they want to learn, it probably didn't actually, it's not representational. There's something beyond. There's a mystery. There's something beyond the horizon that calls forth the learning in the sense that you're talking about. Um, that seems to be to point to what being like education actually is, right? Like, what is it that wants to learn? What evokes learning, right? Um, and it's so
Yeah.
interesting to see that, like, one of the things I would imagine how successful this is unfolding, because basically you're talking about, like, oh yeah, I did this course, I put up a few videos, it went really, really well, I did another one, and then the students of their own doing started to write papers, and then it's like, well,
Yep.
now they're going to start presenting them, and now people will
Yep.
start teaching them. There's a whole thing unfolding. What's cool about it to me is that it seems to be grounded in that spark of they come wanting to learn something, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the whole thing is like grounded in that, expresses that, and is emerging, and you're responding to it. Um,
Yeah.
which is really,
And
it's just,
I'm just responding to that to which I've always responded.
yeah, yes,
Which is I've had two great teachers in my life, and I'm not counting the PhD because maybe because then it would be maybe a bit more. But the most formative years were when I was much younger.
right,
So yeah, there's very good teachers. Max Gottschlich, one of my really good friends, he's an
yeah,
extremely good teacher. Uh, Stephen Holgate at Warwick, who teaches Hegel,
mm-hmm,
very good teacher too. As I said before, Miguel de Bistegi, my supervisor, also is just a really wonderful teacher. But the most formative years were for me my time at Gymnasium, which is high school in Germany, and of course then the university years in Italy. The Ibericinaro is in Italy, and then in Augsburg, in my hometown, it was Matthias Ferber, who was my teacher of ancient Greek, and he was able to bring to life the Greek language so that it wasn't just ornaments that he would use for himself. No, everything began to meaning began to show. This sounds a bit wishy-washy perhaps, but it was meaningful. These texts became meaningful and they showed their profundity.
yeah,
I read Plato and Aristotle, Thucydides, Heraclitus, etc., Parmenides in the original, and thanks to guy was a terrible student. Thanks to or pupil, that's the proper word. Thanks to this one teacher, Matthias Ferber, who was able to teach Greek in such a way that the language was not sterile and dead and some bourgeois exercise of intellectualism, No, but it was living and breathing.
Right.
And it ignited the Pyraeton, the ever-living fire, of which Heraclitus speaks. Huh?
Yeah.
And then it's once this gets you, this is what drove me into academia, because I thought this would be the one place that still has it. And unfortunately, it's not. I'm not saying, I'm not one of those who say, oh, it's all going to come to an end. No, I don't think so. But I think it's probably no longer the right place for those who are young and do it out of a genuine passion. Right? You lock me into this room here. There's two things that's going to happen. I'll sit down and read. I'll sit down and write, and I'll make music.
Right. Yes. It's all the same madness that's awakened in you. It's all.
There's nothing. Then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a constant. And so in other words, it's a constant madness.
Mania.
Yeah.
Mania. Theomania. Theomania. It's a constant divine madness.
Yeah.
That pulls the soul of the philosopher, as Plato says in the Phaedros, the mneme, the remembrance towards the most divine things. Which, it's as Goethe says, right? Everything that's intelligent has already been thought, but the wonder is you have to think it again and again and again. Yeah. And it just so happens that when I'm left to my own devices, so I'm not really sitting still and meditating. Yeah. My meditation is in writing and in reading. Yeah. Where meditating means, in this old sense of perianda, melita tampan. Yeah. Which means what? To take into consideration and profound care everything that is, insofar that it is. This is what meditation does, and this is what the thinker does. Yeah. Right? And I think perhaps to some degree, I've been described as eccentric by my students at university. So that's probably accurate. Eccentricity doesn't bode very well at this point. In institutions, right. But it bodes quite well, right, online. Yeah. And yes, and then you said something about learning and studying and education. I don't even like the word education, because it's pulling something out of someone, leading something out. Yeah. The pedagogue, pedagogein, yes, so it has to do with leading the child. That's true. There's some leadership, but the German word Bildung, the concept of Bildung, is for me a bit better. And I think there was a time when the university could have been like this. Even with when Heidegger was still a professor, he was able to teach us whatever he wanted. We talked about this before. Right. And you read someone like I've got Fichte here now, or someone like Paul Natorp, who was Heidegger's mentor at Marburg. You read these texts and you think, this was a lecture course? Really? Well, right. Sign me up. Right. So, right. Yeah, but the learning it comes from it. So here's a nice word. Yeah. Feedback. Not a nice word, actually. Students in now dinosaur institutions want feedback. Right. Feedback is a word from cybernetics, as Andrew Taggart pointed out to me. Yeah. Our common friend, right? Yeah. And feedback. Right. Students want feedback. There's no feedback in that sense in the seminars. Yeah. There's an open discussion in dialogue, which does not mean, by the way, a conversation between two people, but a thinking and reasoning through. Dia means through. Yeah. A thinking and reasoning through, and in a true sense, commenting. Commentare means to think with. And from the weird thing is that what I found is that not many people take philosophy seriously in philosophy departments. I take it very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I
Right.
think that without philosophy, we do not know how to articulate
Right.
what it means to be and what it means to be human.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that profound. And it's not just some
Mm.
exercise that's interesting or relevant. No, it's fundamentally necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this taking it that seriously speaks to those who also know that there's something that's really profoundly important
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
who we are. And that itself is that you use the word spark, that
Mm-hmm.
sparks something,
Mm-hmm.
that sparks the genuine interest, which means to be with and within.
Yep.
And as we've got him out here, Mr. Fichte, Fichte says at some point in a letter to Reinhold, die Geistesfunken sprühen, the sparks of the spirit are flying.
Right.
Sparks
Right.
still fly, as the Rolling Stones sang,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So the sparks of the spirit are flying, and this is
Right.
something that either it happens or it doesn't happen. But
Yeah.
it happens when I think it happens when the teacher takes the subject seriously,
Yeah.
and then it attracts the kinds of students who don't have to be there.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
for nothing, for no reason other than,
Right.
that draws me in for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need to hear more.
Right.
I want to understand.
What's interesting? What's interesting about that sense of that, like that, which I'm drawn to understand.
Yeah.
That seems to be like a completely different phenomena, because it seems like that which is drawn to understand, essentially what you're, especially in what you're teaching, right, is it's
Yeah.
not like it's not a conclusion. It doesn't seem to be about curiosity. It seems to be grounded in wonder, right? And like curiosity is that sense of like if you increase curiosity, it gets more and more unpleasant. Where wonder, if you increase it, right, it becomes more desirable to have it. So there's that sense of the inexhaustible, that like actually to want, and this is where we start to get into the sense of death, which I think is also speaks to reverence and how to revere, how to have genuine reverence, right? And to,
Yeah.
because reverence has so much to do with an awareness of your own kind of finitude or your limitation, but you're open to and aware that something is beyond, right? Inexhaustible at the same time. And reverence is that sense of like, I am drawn to and to be with in honor of its beyondness, right? That, so it's a way of like not of allowing something beyond the horizon, or the mystery to unfold without raping it of its unknownness or its mystery, right? That sense of reverence. And I know that for me, like, because I didn't go into this, I kind of did this at I just started reading Heidegger. I don't even know why, um, but stumbling through it, right, with my dyslexia and everything like that. But I think what Heidegger did for me, anyways, and reading philosophy did for me, was that I was so clear that I was not understanding what I was reading, but something was disclosed,
Yeah.
and the walk, like there was something about the walk that the text took me on, right? It was like the walk that it took me on, understanding, like in the process of understanding and not understanding, that I got closer to this thing that was ever disclosed. And just, Heidegger never like revealed it in some sense that I can possess, but that just awakened, that just awakened everything for me.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of possessing, that's, we want to possess, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to. Sometimes I said there's nothing more more meaningless than my doctorate title.
Mm.
I rarely use it. I rarely think of it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Because it is actually quite meaningless.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The title itself is, an appreciation of some work I've done.
Mm-hmm.
What matters more is the years spent on this question, and what has opened up through it. And you said, you read Heidegger, you have no idea what's going on. I'm telling you the story now. I'm going to tell you the story now of how this project started.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I left Bolzano in 2012, went to the UK. I knew I would like to do a PhD. I wasn't sure if maybe Nietzsche, maybe Heidegger, maybe something else entirely. And I thought I'm an autodidact on Heidegger. So I had no formal course on Heidegger until the second term of my PhD, when I took a course with Miguel de Bustegui, an introductory course to Being in Time for his second year students. And he said to me, you'll have had so many courses, there's nothing new I can teach you. I didn't tell him, but I didn't have any course on Heidegger before. Mm-hmm. So I read Being in Time on my own, on top of my MA studies in King's College London, which was really a good time, because I read Kant, I read Indian philosophy with a very good teacher. His name was Will Rasmussen. He was very open-minded. Nietzsche with Ken Cheems and Andrew Huddleston, which is also very good. So I read very broadly in terms of continental and non-continental philosophy.
Right.
But no Heidegger, so I read Heidegger on my own, and noticed, and I couldn't articulate it, but I noticed that death is very prominent in Being in Time. And then when you think about it, das Sein zum Tode, being towards death, it sounded like it's being itself that's towards death. And again, let's come back. The question of the book is not how do I live my life, right? It's not about the everyday. It's a bit about the everyday, but it's actually, the first paragraph is the necessity of an explicit repetition of the question of being. The necessity. And then, as you know, in the first paragraph, it says gigantomachia perithesousias, the gigantic battle for being. And I thought there must be something to do, and of course time as well. Death has to do with time, for reasons that we can get into at some other point. Has to do with concealment too, right? And the sheltering. And then I read Heidegger. I read What is Metaphysics in 2013, this short lecture he gave in 1929 when he came to Freiburg. It was his first lecture, his welcoming lecture. I read this in the Staatsbibliothek München, the State Library of Munich. And in a footnote that he added in 1949, which is then added also to the published text, it says, Der Tod, das Gebirg des Seins. That means death, the mountain range of being.
Right. Yeah.
What is this supposed to mean? So 2013, it became clear I'd like to work on that. And I emailed Miguel, and he said, this sounds quite interesting, write a proposal. And he accepted, the rest is history. But it took me, this is 7 years of research now at this point, because I just finished the book on death and being in Heidegger. Because I think that when you look for an answer to the question of being, you have to look to death.
Yeah.
It is in death. Death comes back everywhere. Right. Death is everywhere all the time. Gebirg, Heidegger wants to understand not just as mountain range, but also as the concentration of all the sheltering, harboring, concealment. And in this sense, Gestell, which is the concentration of a forceful positing and making available and controllable.
Right.
In this sense, Gestell is the opponent of death. It must work against death, because it allows for no shelteredness, for no harboredness, for no concealedness, which means being held.
Yeah.
Being held in home.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what Gestell hates, and Gestell wants to eradicate this.
Right.
Hence, you see the transhumanists and posthumanists fighting, battling against death.
Right.
Without death, saying, this is too much of a slogan, but without death, there is no human being. Human being, not as so when I say human being, one has to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Human being does not mean someone over here and someone over there. Human being. There could still be a mass of humanoids, right?
Mm-hmm.
But no human being, in the sense of an openness to the question of being and thinking itself, and language would then be eradicated. The war against language, the war against meaning, is on the same is the same attack as the war against death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Heidegger works this out from very different angles, and this is why the world that is not in opposition, but that is also possible in the epoch of Gestell, which he calls the fourfold in English, the Geviert, the regions of the four, the gathering of the four, with mortals and divinities and earth and sky, mortals. And he says there, mortals are those who are capable, that's the official translation, I will say a bit about this, of death as death.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the German word here, instead of capable, is Vermögen. Vermögen means to like to some degree, so not capable at all, but actually to be open by virtue of liking, being open to something as something. And death as death is a strange formulation. I mean, it's an existential truism to say mortals are those who die. That's completely ridiculous. That's redundant. That's tautological speech. But Heidegger says something else. We are not mortal just by the mere biological fact that our cells, stop to split and whatever they do, then we die.
Right.
No, we have to learn how to die.
Right.
And we are quite deprived of this way of existing. We no longer think of it in this way. Philosophy has always meant to learn how to die.
Right.
Cicero says this, Socrates says it, Michel de Montaigne. You don't have to quote anyone. It's about learning to die, and it's because even thinking does not begin with something.
Yeah.
Thinking itself, positivism. Yes, positivism says, "Here's the book, and here's the pen."
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Positivism, how do you differentiate the two? And already you're in negation, and that's already not possible. I mean, positivism has collapsed, and it collapsed decades ago, for this very reason. But the thinking itself withholds itself, right? It's not available. It actually is the exact opposite. It's withdrawing, and the thought becomes to think withdrawal specifically.
Right. Right.
And this is what death. It is a window for us into it. This is why death is the highest testimony, Heidegger says, of being with a Y. And very early on, this is the first. So the first lecture and seminar is on being in time. But also the first part of the book, which will be out, I think in October, is on Dasein and being in time. And it's entitled Sum Moribundus. Sum Moribundus, right? I think you would say in English. And this is the response Heidegger gives in 1925 when he was in Marburg to Descartes and to Descartes' dictum of the cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. And Heidegger says if such a printed formula would make any sense at all, were to make any sense at all, then it would be sum moribundus, which means I am, and I am in meaning, insofar as I am directed towards my death. Not as mortally ill, he says. Not as mortally ill. But it is this, and we have to distinguish between the later and the earlier Heidegger here, but the earlier Heidegger, it's about directedness towards his utmost limit, in which we always already are. So you see, the representational account thinks of limit as something that limits the border between two countries. But no, the limit is, Jasper speaks of the limit situation, is imminently where we are.
Right.
Death is imminently the moment where we are. This is why Heidegger says, as soon as we are, we're old enough to die. Hegel says the same thing. Hegel says the very same thing.
Right. Right.
It's we are in Heidegger, but radicalizes even further.
Yeah.
We are striding through the mountain range of being in our lives.
Right.
We dwell in death.
Right.
Right. And hence also the inherent danger. It's not just homely or anything. There's something precarious.
We dwell in death. Right. So the thing and this is, I have to say that this one, what Heidegger is revealing, and when he talks about death, for Americans, this one is almost impossible, because you can't get it through representation, basically, is what I'm hearing. You cannot, death is that one thing that cannot be represented, right? Like the moment you represent it as, either as your demise or an event, or, is the world, what was it, the world collapse? As you were talking about the Berkeleyites, Berkeley Heideggerian professors. It's almost in listening to that video where you were going over that, like the misconceptions of the Dreyfus kind of people and the misconceptions of death, where it's almost like they get that they don't understand it. In fact, you can listen to Dreyfus, right? You can listen to him in his course. Right. It's actually, I really like listening to him, because he's getting up there and he's genuinely stumped and trying to work it out. But there is this quality of this sense of, like, they get that they don't understand something, and so they search for the thing that you could say, like, that basically represents, they get it, right? And once if they can get it, right, then they can stop thinking, and then they can go on with the rest of the thing. It's kind of like,
compare and
there's a quality of, like, figuring out, is this, I think it's more grounded in curiosity than it is in wonder, essentially, right? That where it's irritating, it's a struggle, but there is a sense of like, if we can get it right, we can stop the struggle. Whereas with Heidegger, I always get the sense that, no, like, that you're on the right track when something is,
you lose everything.
You lose more and more.
You lose everything. You let go. The thinking of the Ereignis is to let go of everything familiar.
Yeah.
You really are
and
in eerie territory.
That's what representation seems to do, is that when I go, because I notice this happens a lot when I'll talk about Heidegger, right? Like with people, they'll go, oh, that's what the Taoists say, or that's what the da-da-da say, or something like that. And I'm like, wait a minute. Even if that's correct, it's not going to be true, right? Because you're just going to you just stop thinking if you say it's like this, because you just brought it into the realm of the familiar. And what we want to do is, in understanding it, is actually move towards the unfamiliar, right? And to watch, like, at least with my American friends, right? You start saying that stuff, and literally they'll just get pissed and, like, accusational and what are you doing to me?
But the thing is, I'm speaking like an American. But then again, the word thing is not clear what the thing is.
Yeah.
And actually, the thing, as benign as it seems to come along, all right, that's the thing. It's quite horrifying, perhaps. Two things, 2 points, 2 issues. Heidegger wishes to think negativity, as Hegel does, even more radically, more dangerously, and says that, yes, negativity, he doesn't use this word because it's directed at beings, but still, he says, if negativity, then as catastrophe is the English, which means there's actually something that's turning around here. Right. When genuine, profound negativity hits, then something really is turning around and there's a turning, a way of turning, an overturning. And he thinks that this is not really the case with Hegel's negativity. And so he wants to understand the negative as closer to the Greek to deinon, that which is horrifying, that which is horrible, that which is completely, which is in the tragic sense, the moment when all is lost, but still the tragedy continues, right? The Oedipus continues when it's already all horrible. Or Antigone is just, the entire story is pain after pain after pain, and the pain doesn't go away, and it doesn't dissolve either. It just, there's no resolve at the end of it. And that's the deinon. The moment of deinon is when it's clear that this will end in utter pain for everyone involved. But there's no resolve. There's no way around it. It's now just going to continue. And that's how he wants to think the negative. But then you said, it's difficult for Americans. I would have to point out that very likely it's the same over here in Europe, and perhaps even especially in Germany. There is almost no scholarship on Heidegger that would take all these questions seriously. The Germany? Question of being, nowhere, but almost nowhere. I mean, there are a few people here and there, but whereas, there is a question of being. I've written a book with the subtitle "An Answer to the Question of Being." That's the question. And he says very often, the task is to try and articulate a response to it. And this is not there's no absolute response to it. It's a finite attempt at it, and there will be better ones. But that must be the attempt when we take it seriously. Everything else is just, something that's interesting. There's a whole program of turning Seinsgeschichte, the tidings of being, not the history of being, the tidings of being, also in Germany, just into something that's in the past, and just these various ways of interpreting being. Well, what are you saying? That's just perspectivism. But this was the main problem of Gadamer. Gadamer was incapable of actually pointing out anything else than a Nietzschean perspectivism in the first version of his Truth and Method. But to say that it's all just perspectival, it's just saying that everything's more or less contingent. And when everything is more or less contingent, one has to be careful about what sophistry is. Right? People think that sophistry has got to do with rhetoric. Yes, but actually the sophists do something else. The sophists are those who think against thinking, who put on the pedestal, who fetishize or try or argue in terms of contingency. That can come in many different forms. So, mere contingency is found when there is no necessity to something. Let's say it again. The first paragraph is the necessity of repeating this question. That's the first paragraph of Being in Time. Then of course we can talk about whether this is the proper approach, post-Hegel, etc. But why is this necessity given? Because post-Kant, after Kant, what is the revolution of Kant? Kant is not in the business of writing a benign epistemology. Kant would not be Kant if he just said, oh, this is how you recognize an object. Right? I mean, Hume was not in that business either. Hume pointed out that if we give up on reason and categories, what we end up with is the complete absurd position of the self being a heap of impressions, and I don't know whether the sun will rise tomorrow. Or if reason goes unbound, as with John Locke, then it ends up in mere fancy, which means, then you have matter that's also spiritual, and you don't actually need the external world, etc., which is what Berkeley said about John Locke. But what Kant realizes here, maybe without realizing it, is that what all of these thinkers do, especially all the way back to Parmenides, of course, but but even more so in what we now call the early modern period, is to simply presuppose dogmatically the identity between being and thought. The critical philosophy, which is not a system,
right,
critique asks how is this presupposition possible, which is the identity between being and thought,
right,
which was just assumed before.
yeah,
Never even questioned. So the critical, that's where it sets in. But then all hell breaks loose with this.
Yeah.
That's the revolution of thought. And now what post-Kant all philosophy has to do, if it doesn't want to be dogmatic,
right,
it has to be able to think of its presuppositions and rein them in. And this is what Heidegger does or tries to do.
Right.
And this is what Heidegger tries to do with the entire philosophy up until to him. Right? And then we get to problems of concealment, etc., etc. But that's for another time.
And there's that. I think what I just really kind of got in what you were saying is that what philosophy does is it reveals what presupposes what you took as self-evident or weren't even noticing that anything was presupposed. What makes that evident, right, and obvious?
Yes. But look.
Philosophy, at least for like in my experience, seems to go. It questions something that I wasn't even not oriented towards. But when the moment it's questioned, it revealed that I was standing on something that was giving everything, and that like shaking up, that uncanniness seems to be a lot of the what I think that probably Heidegger is getting at with anxiety and being in time. Of it reveals the uncanniness of the ground, of that you're standing on things that allow things to reveal themselves, that are at work that you could not know about, and you could not know that you didn't know about, but you were given by something about finding, like, kind of coming awake in that seems to be very similar to the awakening of philosophy itself on some level. Right.
And look, what's important also in terms of Heidegger is we have to understand who it is that he's responding to.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of you called them Berkeleyites.
Yeah.
For them, Heidegger apparently just talks about me walking around feeling anxious because I'm in the state of total world collapse called death.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But that's kitchen psychology, as we could say in German, Küchenpsychologie. That's psychology for the masses.
Yeah.
And Heidegger calls psychology, by the way, psychotechnics, which is an interesting reference. But Heidegger responds to the entirety of philosophy. And Heidegger points out, for example, in the essay, The Principle of Identity, the Ersatzstate, and actually the spring of identity. He says that the thought of identity, that A can equal A, what kind of presupposition thought must make here, without going into it too much, for thinking to find out that it has always already made the presupposition of the identity between being and thought. It took thinking 2,000 years, he says this, to get to this point with Kant and then Fichte, Jacobi, Schelling, and Hegel, who try to bring it together again, especially Hegel.
Yeah.
And actually, this is why Hegel philosophizes without presuppositions, without any horizon. The Science of Logic, Hegel's masterpiece, is a logic that moves forward by the categories collapsing, necessarily because the understanding wants to hold on to them, but reason sees that you cannot hold on to them.
Yeah.
So you start with being, pure being.
Yeah.
And then the understanding wants to say something, being, pure being. But then it already shows some activity. even though it's
that's
pure.
that connection where the actuality is supreme, right? With Hegel versus the possibility.
Yeah, but we have to
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
yes. Um, yeah, but we'll have to be, I think, I'll have to think about that. Yes, but also what Hegel
Yeah.
does is, he just like Heidegger takes into consideration
Yeah.
the entirety of philosophy, because
Right.
Parmenides stays here at being is being is being,
Yeah.
more or less,
Yeah.
where it's nothing with nothing.
Yeah.
But it can't be nothing with nothing, because nothing will come up, right? It's just like death. In pure
Right.
existential terms, death will come to haunt you if you
Right.
don't, if you don't consider death.
Yeah.
An epoch that wants to know nothing about nothingness will be
Yeah.
haunted by what? By nihilism.
Yeah.
What Hegel shows, though, is that no category actually remains just a state. It's all activity, right? Negativity is activity. Spirit is negativity. Ontology, in the traditional sense, that's what's misguided. To think of the mind as a res cogitans, a thinking thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's in a continuous Übergehen, passing over and passing back. And this is what Heidegger responds to, is the critical philosophy of Kant and the response to it by Hegel and Schelling especially.
Mm-hmm.
And Heidegger is trying to show that what all of this is grounded in, right? Careful, but what all of this is grounded in is Dasein, and is also, and then we can get into concealment, etc. too. But no, but it's when we take Heidegger seriously, that we begin to see that it isn't arbitrary, right? One cannot just take up a text in philosophy and read into it whatever contingently comes to mind.
Yeah.
That's really a destruction of the tradition, and that basically, when we speak of the meaning crisis, that's what has to do with it.
Right.
Is it becomes arbitrary.
Yeah.
We cannot just take up a text from Parmenides and say, oh, but we can reinterpret this in this many ways. And Heidegger doesn't do this either. Heidegger sees what all of this, so he doesn't say, this is what happened here, and I'm just going to go over here and do this entirely new thing.
Yeah.
No, he says there's always been something at the heart of it which has been forgotten, but that's not a pejorative.
Yeah.
It's forgotten necessarily.
Yeah.
Because of the movement of the thought itself. Right. And then it becomes transparent to itself, just like with Kant in this critical instance. Philosophy noticed that it had always made the presupposition of the identity between being and thought. So afterwards, you have to look at even more presuppositions. And Heidegger says that this is the shared memory in which thinking participates, or which thinking is, the gathering of thinking, means to think that which has been thought. This is a different formulation for this, right? But this is what it has to do. And this is why I think there's this the relationship between, or as Heidegger says in the Freiburg talks, the elective affinity between death and thinking. Insofar as thinking is always under threat of dying off, and is always under threat of falling into an utter concealment. Right. But it's also under threat of trying to bring everything into a sheer light that forgets shadow and darkness. Right. And in this sense, because I'm seeing behind you there, the School of Athens by Raffaello. Right. I mean, look, I have this a photograph of this painting on my channel, and it's quite appealing, it's aesthetically pleasing, etc. But what is the Renaissance? The Rinascimento, the Renaissance, it's got nothing to do with, this is a wonderful time where everything was so bright and meaningful. No, the Renaissance is the time where people like Leonardo da Vinci and Giordano Bruno begin to think. Giordano Bruno writes one of his essays is on the shadows of ideas. What comes back in the Renaissance is exactly this interplay between light and darkness and shadows. And this is also why my lecture series is called The Coming Renaissance. We need to be able to think post-enlightenment. What it means to think in shadows. And by the way, why is Kant ein Aufklärer, an enlightener, someone who clears up the sky? Not in any, not morality, etc. No. He is an enlightener, a clearer, because he clears thinking. He discloses to thought itself that it has always made this presupposition. Now, for the Heideggerian reader, this means there was something, quote unquote, concealed. So, boom. It's always concealment. And then Heidegger sees this and radicalizes this thought of concealment. And that then is called the concentration of it is death. Right. And by thinking it, we don't want to make it available. Right? We don't mean to. It's not about making it operational, right? If only I just and then I can deal with death, or then we can overcome it. No. It's you let it occur. And this letting lets you in to this other mode of being that no longer wants to control, but lets occur. That's Gelassenheit, right? The letting be. Really, it's just it's ultimately a form of piety, which means a love for ancestry, but it's also a form of humility. Right. Modesty. Certain modesty in thought. But this is not arbitrary, right? Because this is the task of mortals who have unwanted powers. Right.
And this is precisely
at this point,
what Gestalt doesn't have access to, right? Because Gestalt is all about it can't reveal concealment. It's that quality, and basically what I'm hearing you say, and what I get from reading philosophy and Heidegger, and is that that basically all the good stuff, right, is in the hidden, and that our what gives us meaning is not the revealed, like what's shining is obvious in the light, but that which is concealed, in being oriented and awake to that concealment, right, that withdrawal, but in such a way that, like, and this is, I think, if I were to kind of say it in my own words, like with Gelassenheit, like the sense of it's like allowing, it's allowing, you could say, the unknown to become present without making it known, without turning it into the known, like that sense of the negative space, or the to be attuned into that. Like our age seems to be precisely the very thing that doesn't even notice that it's not attuned into that, right?
Yeah, and it's very important. So Gestell is the concentration of positing. It has nothing to do with machines. Machines are a result of this. Of the technical. So the Gestell is not even. I mean, so we have to be careful, because to some degree we hold the will to power in our hands with these things, but we don't want to represent or imagine Gestell as the machine world or the world of algorithms, etc. But what the world, it's not really a world, right? Because there's nothing human about it. What the algorithms do, though, is they posit the world by means of the parameters of time and space. Now, here's what's eerie about the old Kant. He notices that metaphysics has always made this presuppositing, prepositing, literally, right? This pre-hypothesis, thesis, right, meaning to posit, which is fine because we need to posit some things.
Yes.
We
Yeah.
need to posit just to build a house. But
Yeah.
in thought, it is rather difficult to articulate reality or to articulate being, which is not the same. We have to be careful, but let's just say it for now like this. So Kant notices this, and that's the earthquake that is Kant, which we are suffering. But then how does he respond to it? He wants to hold on to, because ultimately we always have to find something to hold on to. He wants to hold on to the logic of positing, the logic of instrumental rationality, as we now call it, of a knowledge of power. Mm. It's in the knowledge, it's how, from a Hegelian stance, it's in how we articulate ourselves and life and nature on the logical plane.
Mm. Right.
That we begin to act and be in the world. Right. And what Kant does is he sees this presupposition, but then when you read the first critique, it's one positing after another. Yeah. And it's at some point set up in such a way that what we no longer have access to with Kant is what? Things in themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why Heidegger writes these essays, Building, Dwelling, Thinking, and the thing, coming back to the thing in itself, with an essence of itself, with an ousia of itself. Because here's the weird thing, the natural sciences and their laws. Mm-hmm. One thing, if you like, that they never look at is nature. Nature herself is not visible to the natural sciences. Yeah. Because what the natural sciences look at are abstract laws.
Yeah. Right.
They look at, for example, very simple, very, almost too benign to even point out. There's a cat and there's a stone. They weigh the same. You drop them both. It doesn't matter what's being dropped and what falls. What matters is the mass and the volume and the weight. Yeah. What they look at is an abstract law, which is not visible. Yeah. It's metaphysical in the proper sense of the word.
Right.
Nature has always already turned away from what the operations of Gestell, which just posits something.
Yeah. Yeah.
About it.
Yeah.
Which we call models, right?
Right.
A model by which we then access the world.
Yeah.
Or the world view.
Yeah.
The world picture.
Yeah.
Which is not really a picture at all. It's a mathematical model.
Is that kind of like, does that link into one of the reasons why the more technological devices, for example, the more it disappears, the more you can't, like when the phone's really being the phone, you don't notice the phone, and the moment it doesn't work, it's not like a windmill, right? A windmill, it stops working, but you leave it there. It still gathers world. It still has meaning, and it's old, and it, right? Whereas like
it's
a phone,
something that shines through.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's just this mill.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I will now step down from the higher, abstract what I just talked about, because 3 years ago I traveled through this fine island here, and I went down with my parents to St. Ives and Tintagel, which is at the very far western end of this island. I think it's Cornwall. It's one of these places, beautiful down there. So Tintagel might have been the castle of King Arthur. Tintagel is a touristy place, and the castle doesn't really stand anymore. But then we hiked across and along the coastline. There's this very, very English coast. It's not the chalk white coast, but it's quite rocky and some kind of dark stone. I wouldn't know which one. Yeah. So we kept walking. There was no one there. We hiked down towards a small river that here was flowing into the ocean. And as we walked down, we decided to. We also had no phone service. Nothing worked, which is rarely the case anymore. And then we hiked up the tiny river, and came across an old mill, water mill, which had been abandoned hundreds of years ago. Who knows? It was a ruin, just a ruin. But the sensation very much was that there is still something gathered here. Something was still lingering. An old world still shone through. It was shining still. This thing I cannot tell apart from any other.
Yes.
And it will be forgotten.
Yes.
The minute I buy a new one.
Yes.
Because I can download and upload and to the cloud and blah, 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 whatever there is on it in terms of a piece of data. Yes. And this is how we now treat all of so-called history. Right. History is just a filage system, right? A filing system, sorry, a pigeonholed filing system. And the same with we can say a bit provocatively, there is no history of philosophy. Yeah. There is only thinking. Yeah. And either you are open to access the avenue towards thinking, or you are stuck on the level where it's just arbitrary historical observations about, is it this kind of ism or that kind of ism? Yeah. There is a necessity, and Heidegger says this again and again, there is a necessity to his thinking, and that it takes thinking thousands of years. And at the same time, he also says something which is remarkable and important for us. Thinking only just now begins, because it's twisting free to some degree also from its own presuppositions, right, in the sense that it doesn't liberate itself and then just roams freely. No, but it's becoming more and more transparent to it what had remained concealed, and that there is always concealment also at work or withdrawal. So that's what Heidegger ultimately calls another beginning. And all this talk about collapse and Heidegger is very critical of Spengler, for example, the decline of the West, because for him that's just a representational account. Yeah. Oh, history comes in cycles. Right. It goes up and it goes down. Yeah. It's almost silly to say this. Right? Yeah. There's a lot of talk right now about collapse. There's a lot of talk right now about the apocalypse. And I make the distinction, by the way, between apocalyptic thinking and apocalyptic representation. Yeah. Apocalyptic representation and imagination, it actually gravels. It drives on these visions of fire burning and entire cities collapsing, and kind of this almost like, you can see this on the political spectrum on all sides, right? Yeah. Like, people want it seems. And apocalyptic thinking is a completely different mode. Right. It doesn't actively look for, but it is open for openings in what we usually call history, which is not just a succession of events, right, but there's always a tiding. There's always something that announces itself, to which we respond, always already. Right. And I think that brings about a certain modesty also, because the other, the apocalyptic collapse fantasies, they either want everything to collapse for everything to burn, or they want everything to collapse to have the perfect utopia coming later on. And none all of this, to me at least, forgets death and forgets the other, right? This other way of being, and also what ultimately it means to be human. And we can, I think it's then probably more to be human means to build, yes, and to dwell, yes, but then also to let go. Yeah.
And to recognize how deeply you already are let go, right? That's the thing about, like, I notice that seems to be, at least for me, when I feel the sense or the intimacy of being has to do often, and this is what happens in philosophy and poetry, where you realize the thing that you were sensing into that was like just beyond your capacity to see was that which was just most near, right? And that kind of recognition that, oh, I'm already always, the all kind of that sense of already always finding myself already begun, underway, right? This kind of quality of, oh, even what, no matter what I was representing, there was an intelligibility, right, that kind of didn't need me, right, to be going on, right? And that when that's revealed, there's something really, it's humbling, but it's also, yeah, it kind of gets at that sense of like both in intimacy, like a really deep intimacy, but also transparent to kind of an inexhaustibility that's really near. Yeah, because that's everything that you're talking about is like on some level is articulating or pointing to what is the case, right? But is concealed, like on some level is concealed from me, right? That, and you can look back on it. I know people a lot of times, you know, they get this kind of awakening, like when they read about history, right? Of like where they recognize their way of thinking about something wasn't, just isn't self-evident, like the case that there's a history to it, like that there's something that we're always responding to. And it does seem like, you know, I was thinking about this too, about you know, how the way that Heidegger talks about listening, in my understanding, right? You know, where he says, perhaps it's a good idea that
Yeah.
we can begin to hear things that we don't already think, right? And I was thinking about that just in kind of talking to people, or in what I do in circling, where
Yeah.
there's this deeply moving thing that happens for people that um they talk about this experience of being deeply seen. And that's that phrase is a little bit paradoxical, because it seems to conjure up a sense of like kind of something to then see. But I
Yeah.
actually think it's the opposite of that. People don't have the experience of being deeply seen by when you repeat back to them, right, the thing that's available to be seen. It's more like when you can start to hear with them the thing that they're that they've been at the deepest level caring for and caring about, like the sense of what's beyond the horizon. When you
Hmm.
can go, somehow that you
Yeah.
that gets revealed,
Yeah.
that people, the beyond, the thing that they can't put into words, that gets revealed as people have this, oh my god, I feel deeply seen, right?
Which sounds
Which I think is a function of like what, like hearkening, listening really seems to be oriented around, right?
which would be very different than from the other psychotechnics, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like psychoanalysis, so
yeah,
called,
yeah.
which is a weird term, by the way, because analysis means to take apart.
Right, right, right. Totally, totally.
um, so
Yeah,
just pointing that out.
yeah,
Um, that I just said it. So let's see what the
yeah.
ether does with it, right?
Right, right. Which presupposes there's already that which to take apart, and that,
Yeah, but just to take apart,
yeah, 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 yeah,
which is the opposite of being seen through listening.
yeah, yes,
And then we would have to dwell on, or we could, um, on the importance of hearing in Heraclitus, right? Ukemu ala tulogu akusantes homologein sophonistin hen pantaenai.
yeah,
Not to me,
yeah,
but to the logos having heard.
yeah,
It is wise to say sophonistin
yeah,
homologein hen pantaenai, that one is many, that
yeah,
out of one many, the all unifying one. This is, by the way, what Heidegger thinks also. The all unifying one. We always already hear the logos.
yeah,
We always already hear it, but don't perhaps always hearken to it and respond to it.
Right.
And as you know, Heidegger was in touch with the Solikon people, Medard Boss, the psychiatrists there, and they were outraged in the beginning because he said you can't begin with a subject-object dichotomy. Being seen, right? Seen as just some isolated subject, or perhaps seen as someone who is in this all unifying one, which out of which many, and to which we hear, so that it becomes wise not in this intellectual sense of knowing a lot, but it becomes wise, sophon, sophia, deep, profound wisdom that's addresses all the time. That's perhaps this being seen. That's being articulated and being said by many. And that's this other form of meditation too. Which now today means to sit in the room on your own. No, it means to take into care everything that is insofar that it is, which is not a concrete entity in this kind of representational sense. But exactly again in this harmony or this concert in this symphony of existence, which again, according to Heraclitus, only arises from out of that which diapherein, that which bursts apart and then comes together. It's fascinating to witness this a bit, right, for me, because it's where all of the psycho things, the psycho, they're not there. They're not there because what they're looking at is either looking at a case, a case in the sense of, you are classified as this, and you take, if you're a psychiatrist and you take this pill, and I'm sure that pills at some point are perhaps necessary, but it doesn't. Never does it get to the heart of the problem. What is depression? What is depression? What is melancholia? Why does Dürer paint melancholia? What is it for us today? Oh, you're not functioning. Why is schizophrenia prevalent in what we call capitalism? What is capital? It's not asked. It doesn't come up. And I think it cannot come up because ultimately it's about containment. It's about taming. And the thought of Heidegger and death is another one. Is not to tame. Is to let loose and let's see then what happens, because weirdly enough, it is more than with an allowance for the eerie as well, that it doesn't haunt us that much. The way to do it, one has to find for oneself. But the Heidegger, as you know, the later Heidegger is all about dwelling and Handwerk even, right? The thinking of him becomes a craft, something of the hands too. How do we build, not housing, but dwelling grounds for mortals? Is when we don't deny death. It's almost too simple to say it. If not, we're just units of consumption, units of capital to which capital flows.
Building neighborhoods to look like neighborhoods. That's the strangest thing. Strip out, yes.
Yeah, but it's just
yes. That's what happened. Every new housing division or something going up. I'm like, they are literally building all of those houses in a neighborhood to look like a neighborhood, and you can feel them not being a neighborhood. They are there to represent or look like being a neighborhood. It's the strangest thing. And it's like the hollowness of it is just almost nauseating for me.
It needs a church at the center of it.
Yes.
And the church has a graveyard.
Yes.
And the church is the place, and speaking of Western European, it would be a mosque or a synagogue, for example, somewhere else, or a temple.
Yeah.
Right, it could be a Buddhist temple as well, but let's say the church. It's where the child is baptized,
Yeah.
where the couple is, where you get married,
Mm,
and where you're buried.
mm,
One of, by the way, just speaking from just personally, one of the beautiful things about this country here is that they don't, or not very often at least, get rid of their old cemeteries.
mm,
So you walk around even in a
mm.
place like London. I was
That's right.
just
Yeah, I
recently,
remember that about London. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, recently I went to William Blake's grave, which is an old graveyard
Huh,
in the middle, actually, of the financial district.
huh.
And I left a flower, or a stone, actually, not a flower, a stone on his tombstone, which is a very, yeah. There are these cemeteries that they turn into parks, but they don't. Every grave is just left to its own devices and collapses slowly into itself. Which is how you see also the earth regaining and kind of the honors of, the here
Yeah.
lies Captain such and such, sergeant of this and that army, or here lies professor here and there. Most of these honors mean almost nothing very very quickly too. That's perhaps something you see as well, but
Mm,
it is in this. Yeah, I wonder, we could perhaps expand on this at some point, and
yeah.
in what sense this being seen is outside the specter or the matrix of representation,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? And
Exactly.
where it perhaps it also has to do with to some degree, I'm not sure, we can talk with mortality too, but it is, I think, outside of
Yeah.
representation. It's no longer, you're not looked at a case like this,
Yeah.
or you show these kinds of, oh, I think your daddy was mean to you,
Mm,
or you did you want to be your mother. These weird
yeah.
schemas that we now have
Yeah.
developed. Oh, this is must be, we walk around through representational schemas, right? Oh,
Yeah.
that must be unconscious. Oh, that
Right.
must be something you experienced in your, oh, no, maybe there's always something else at work, of which there are
Yeah.
terrible cases,
Yeah.
really terrible. In, Human beings are, as
Yeah.
Kant rightly says, radically evil,
Right.
evil at the root. There are evil things that happen
Right.
in the world too. Very often, unfortunately, because people thought they were doing good and they wanted to do good.
Yeah.
But then again, I wonder sometimes that perhaps people talk about the rise of people who are depressed.
Yeah.
Well, what is it
Yeah.
that is depression
Yeah.
pointing to?
And
What is,
what's it what is that what does it know, how does depression know to respond as depression? That's the part, like, I've noticed with and I think it's the thing that you're talking about is like the listening to someone really happens when it's like one is like if they're paying attention to anything, there's a response, right?
yeah, yeah,
That's like it's precisely that. It's like, oh, what are you responding to? That you would be talking about this. What is it that how does attention know to attend to this? What is this? And what's that which is worthy of that response? Like, and you start to, what's interesting is like you start to two things. It's like the one is it starts to reveal a care, an implicit care on their behalf that they're responding. So it reveals on one level this kind of the horizons, the backgrounds of what's going on with them, which is usually historical on some level, right? And just their comporting in that way also reveals a world in which they're attempting to reveal, but there's also this sense of like that it reveals that revealing is happening. So there's this quality of just they actually start, yeah, actually I think what it is, it may actually be where they actually hear themselves as something that is beyond their representation, right? And it's that kind of sense of like, oh my God, like I
Yeah.
am more than I can. I am more than I can conceive. Like,
Well, you know, one could say in the slogan, I'm going to have to be careful with this, it's the being kicks in and representation drops.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
too simply put, but
It does sound like a
it
great T-shirt.
yeah, you can have it. It's yours.
A little bit too long for a coffee cup, but almost.
Yeah. No, but it's right. One of the things I've said as well, and I'm not sure whether I've been able to, because I don't think I've made it clear enough, is that what perhaps we are witnessing and happening, it's only just now, the showing itself really, really more horribly than before, is the apocalypse of the subject. It's opening up
Mm.
to it's at its utmost maximum of what it can control and wants to control and manage, and finds itself, I think, increasingly incapacitated to do so. But this constant talk of crisis, there's a crisis in everything, where the word has become basically meaningless at this point. And it seems to be, could be, that the will to power has pushed to an utmost limit where it finds it's no longer powerful. It can no longer will control. It would have to face death. Let's just put it like this. But without facing death, everything is turned into a crisis without ever becoming a crisis. And a crisis is a moment of decision.
Yeah.
And what you're describing, I can only, as someone who listens and spectator, so I'm not a participant in it, and I couldn't be, I suppose. But what I think is perhaps showing there is that what we call subjectivity in the philosophical sense, which means enclosedness, the split from the world, and to some degree now, of course, in a schizophrenic sense, also split from oneself, because the way people talk is of themselves in a representational manner, as if there is something behind them, which is from which point they speak about themselves in this constant reflective manner. That drops away, and then this sense of being seen shines through, which reveals another way of being human, if you like, right? A deeper way, which is what Heidegger would call Dasein, where it's shown that it's already being with others.
Right.
It's always already been being in the world.
Yeah. And there is that quality too of it's like I think Jung talks about this, where a lot of people read Jung and then they kind of like, they don't realize how much he's talking about, especially with the shadow, right? The notion of the shadow, which is the first thing that you contend with when you do Jungian analysis and stuff like that. And people usually think of like, you get to the shadow by reflecting on yourself, right? And Jung was like, no, people forget that he's writing this in the context of what he's discovering in a relationship with somebody. That and I never, it just recently I started to realize, like, oh yeah, this ties into how genuine listening and genuinely being with somebody begins, is precisely when you realize that you're projecting onto the other person, right? And then you start to see that, in a certain sense, oh, that I'm projecting, I wasn't actually listening to you, right? It's that hearing that you weren't hearing is the moment that hearing begins, right? It's that's the thing about listening. This is one of the trickiest things of teaching people how to listen. First of all, you can't. All you can do is to show people that they're not. In the moment they can hear that they're not hearing, right, is the moment that something else breaks through, and they, yes.
But it is similar with thinking, but
Mm-hmm.
our MO, right, as they say, is a different one. It's the one of positivism, which is hearing by, by using our ontic substrate hearers
Right.
here as
Right.
receivers of sound waves.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you because you and I were having a conversation. So of course I'm hearing you.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Yeah.
Or of course I'm thinking. I mean, I've been thinking about Italian or Chinese food tonight. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or of course I'm thinking because I have all these ideas about what to do. I mean, just the fact that you can say idea
Yeah.
in this manner as we do now. Right? So
Yeah.
there's this website called, people will know it, Pinterest, where you can collect ideas about what your perfect home would look like. No offense to anyone who uses it,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that you can say the word idea, this old Greek work in Plato is right behind you there on the painting.
Mm-hmm.
That this old word, and this old world too, shines through, screams through almost through this word, in this world of ideas that's run by ideas. What is going on? We are, it's this being trapped in the cave is something that keeps me up at night. But there's always this this moment when it's about philosophy. Like, why is it important? Because it's all there. It's all been thought. You have to think it again for our epoch.
Yeah.
There is no coincidence that we're running that a planetary system is being run that's driving on ideas, etc. It's an apparent availability and positivity. But it comes in many forms. By positivism, I mean something's being posited as available and present.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you could, just as a joke, people who say think positively, there's no thinking positively. Thinking, what would it think? It's just positing. It's literally just positing something. It's just saying something.
Yeah.
Thinking begins in negation. Spinoza says, omnis determinatio est negatio, every determination is a negation. There is no determination without negation. How would you determine anything without negating it to be not something else? And then the highest form of this for Hegel in the dialectics is, which cannot be formalized, right? The nothing cannot be formalized, is the negation of the negation. That's the activity of negativity. And that's spirit. Spirit is negativity.
Yeah.
That roams freely in history. And it's upon us to grasp this conceptually, and then to quarrel over and fight over what the meaning of freedom is.
Right.
Freedom is not a given. You're not given freedom by some constitution or here's your negative freedom. Now you can do whatever you want. No, it's freedom is something that's fought over precisely for this reason.
Right.
Is that it's not a given.
Yeah, it's like it's reading with Chris, reading the Socratic dialogues. It's like it seems like what Socrates is doing is he's yes.
Sorry, but look, this is philosophically very important. That people, who's people? So I will not say people because it's a bit awful. So apologies. In general, I think the assumption is that there are two worlds in Plato. There aren't. And Plato does not say that this tree over here is not really. He says it's meon. It's not fully being, but in this not fully being, it is.
Yeah.
It is because it's not fully, but it then becomes full insofar as the thinking being participates in this occurrence and must articulate the being of this being.
Yes. Right.
Right? Yes. This is what all of thinking has to do. We are participants and suffering participants of this ongoing occurrence.
Yeah.
And to speak with Heidegger, being is rare. not everything that's out there properly is.
Yeah.
Right. And this is also why in this time that's accelerating and exploding, everybody wants to be. And then it turns out as representational, it's like this and it's like that, and schematized, and that can be easily rehashed, etc. We can make all these points about capital then too. You can, and it's becoming a bit of a Platonic cave, right? We're sitting in these rooms and we're looking at each other's screens and avatars. So that's the danger of it. But at the same time, is when you read these dialogues, I didn't know what you want to say, but it's very important to point out that Plato does not speak of two different worlds,
right?
But that we always have to think negation, in order to actually arrive at what we now call reality. Reality is not just here's all these things.
Yes.
Is reality arises from out of negation. Out of also abstoßen, right? For Hegel, it would be abstoßen, which is pushing away. Pushing away from the immediate, which is exactly the story of the cave. By just looking at the shadows, these people are not ever dealing with being. They're not ever the prisoners of the cave, as it were. They're not ever even becoming free.
Right.
But they think they are free because they can remember. The right order of the shadows passing by. But it's actually in pushing away from it, in saying no, in withdrawal, that the original concealment begins to unconceal. While then with Heidegger again, just coming back into the cave, appreciating the concealment again.
Yes. And that's kind of what another thing I'm noticing in these dialogues is Socrates, he's like, basically asking a question, and then they start talking about it, and like everything, like all of this information gets more frustrating, and they go around, and Socrates doesn't even know what the virtue is, and at some point there's this aporia where the thing that can't be said in the dialogue becomes present, right? This kind of sense of where I think it's that sense of all those kind of apparatic questions that bring you up to the limit of you're representing, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. I would not stop with the aporia, right? That's often the mistake that's made. Oh, it's just all ends in aporia. No. That's the early dialogues.
Well, that's the beginning of it.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And it gets symbolized, right? I think it gets symbolized in usually at the end of the talks, like these dialogues. None of the questions were answered, yet people want to send their kids to spend more time with Socrates, right? People see better. There's that quality of the negativity, if you will, right? The hollow that we realize that we didn't realize that we were circling around the whole time.
But what the so-called aporia, right? But you see how the reception always works. Oh, it's just aporetic and it's just all paradoxical. Everything's absurd, blah, blah, blah. No. What's showing itself to be absurd is what was portraying itself as perfectly rational, which is with Hegel, the logic of the understanding, which proclaimed that it can corroborate exactly what so-called virtue by itself is. But then you have to begin to think no longer in terms of what someone does or someone says or someone opines, but no, you have to begin to think in terms of principles. And that's why they end in so-called aporias, because they don't step up to the level of reason, of logos itself, but stay on the level of trying to represent and making available. And easily, of course, a model, right? Something that can be, and this is why it's so absurd to say we should have built Heideggerian AI. I mean, what is this even supposed to mean? A Heideggerian AI, an AI that's actually being in the world. I mean, the one think of the 20th century who wanted nothing else but to be completely outside the clutches of instrumentality, and that you cannot make his thinking operational. There's no model. There's no formula that can be taken from Heidegger.
Right.
And even Hegel is even more. One can unfortunately easily attack Hegel on these grounds. It's, as some people did very, very prominently. Karl Marx thought that he could use Hegelian dialectics to see the future.
Right.
But that's a perfect example of what representation is. It assumes it can see the future just by the right method, for example. But the utopian, wonderful state will just inevitably come if all we do is get the dialectics right.
Yeah.
That's representation.
Yeah.
And Heidegger, you cannot make him instrumental. It's completely impossible.
Yeah.
And in this sense, it's operatic, but it's only operatic for a representation, not for thinking. Thinking itself is always on the way, Heidegger says.
Yeah.
But it's coming. It's about coming home.
Right.
And it's ultimately about dwelling, and dwelling means to come home. It means to come home, but going out and then coming home. Going out is this negation, right? This moment of saying no.
Yeah.
Leaving the cave.
Yeah.
Coming back in.
Right. Right.
And this is, I think, these are the moments of moments. I don't know, but this is what for Heidegger is concealed and gathered and concentrated and sheltered in death.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's something it's something I just wanted to talk with you about too. In your I'm reading your teacher's book, The Weirdness of Being, Di Gennaro. And that is not an easy book at all. But it's not an easy book at all. And I'm appreciating it. I'm appreciating it a lot. But one of the things that he said in your last videos, and it struck me, was that Heidegger, towards the end of his life, was like writing in these journals 10 hours. He was thinking 10 hours a day.
In the 30s, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the end of his life. At his peak, actually.
Right. Like he was just in his, on his, the hut, the Heideggerian hut, right? Like out there. The journals that are now being published that you get every month or something, like because half of his work hasn't been published, right? And it's in these little notebooks that you can actually get as they translate it, correct? You were telling me that?
Yeah, I guess. Well, not as they translate, but some of the notebooks are being published, and the Heidegger Society sends out once a year some shorter notes too. Yeah.
Right.
Not every month though, I think.
I saw some pictures of it, and like a lot of them are, some of them are drawings, and they have arrows, and there's what is he, in a certain sense, what is he doing when he's doing that? Like 10 hours a day, right? Thinking. And I guess people would come and they would think for 10 hours a day, right? What's your sense of what is he doing when he's doing that in those journals? Like, to the extent that you've read them.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are, for example, one of them is Contributions to Philosophy, Beiträge zur Philosophie, written in 1938, published, I think, in the 80s. Mm-hmm. Another one is Das Ereignis, published, I think, 10 years ago, written in the 40s. And this is where Heidegger begins to think in terms of Ereignis, which I will leave untranslated. I think event is a poor translation. But Ereignis is, well, I shouldn't really say what it is, but he comes into this thinking and begins to see something or think something, the withdrawal, concealment, that needs to be thought. So it needs to be thought. It thinks in me, he says at some point to his brother, that there's nothing he can do about this. And this is what's so strange to modern, I think, human beings, because you have this opinion, I have this opinion, I think it's this ism, you think it's that ism.
Right. Right.
But maybe it isn't. Maybe it is really that some things have to be thought, and some thoughts have to be thought, and they have to be thought thoroughly. And this is what he does, knowing, however, that nothing that is thought, and Heidegger says, knew this as well, can ever be fully recorded.
Yeah.
We should not conflate the books someone writes with the thought.
Yeah.
We still have to think when we read the books.
Yeah.
The books are gateways. They're necessary. We need books. We need records too.
Yeah.
But that's not all there is.
Right. Right.
There's an echo of another realm, perhaps too, or other realms that we have to take on. And so there's a necessity to this writing. It's a necessity, right? If there is a necessity to it, then you will simply have to write. It was necessary not because Heidegger thought it necessary, but because thought itself. So I say the sentence again. Thought itself necessarily in this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Heidegger is also the thinker, as you know, who keeps coming back to mnemosony, the goddess of memory, to the muses, and he mentions them not arbitrarily again.
Mm-hmm.
Homer addresses the muses. That's the first two lines of the Odyssey. Sing to me, muse, of the man, the manifold, etc. So it's listening to something, not something, but listening, and then having to, because thought itself now has to, and we said this before, Kant stumbles upon this presupposition all of thought had made. And Heidegger says, again, I said this before, it took thinking 2,000 years to begin to see this presupposition.
Yeah.
He doesn't say it takes thinkers. He doesn't say it took some pesky German up in Prussia and Königsberg to, oh, by the way, I think, no. It took thinking 2,000 years.
Yeah.
It's thinking itself that thinks itself.
Yeah.
But we have to respond and correspond to it. As long as we are a human being. Why? Because according to Aristotle, we are zoon logon nechon, which is not the rational animal, but the living being that finds a stance in logos, echon, which is related, by the way, to the word skole, which is only poorly translated as leisure. So let's get this word. It's skole. It's finding skole. Yes. So finitude is calling me, which means I'm hungry.
Yes. It's been great talking with you as usual.
As always.
No,
yeah, really, really good. I mean, what we should discuss further next time, maybe also for the record, if you like, is on representation and seeing and being seen.
Yes.
And then we'll flip it a bit, and I'll listen more and talk less.
This may be actually the thing. This may be actually the thing that would be good for me to my piece on the writing, actually.
Yeah.
Because this is what it is central in what circling seems to be.
Yeah, let's do it then.
All right. Great. Thanks for the madness.
Theomania.
Yes.
Theomania.
Yes. It's been good, like tuning in and hearing the madness.
Thank you for the dislodgement. Yeah, but that's just me on a regular Tuesday night.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye.